where something bad has happened, especially to a loved one, especially to a child of yours, it's great to be able to have this knowledge in your mind as far as, and the Staying Alive song you're referencing there, that makes all the sense if you think about the tune, and I don't have access to the tune at this very second, but everyone's heard it. It's been on the radio for 40 years, and you kind of have the idea that that's the movement that you need to keep going to, keep it going. And to know that mindset, and even as you mentioned, keeping your child on their side versus on their belly or on their back, this is very important information. Do you think this is the sort of thing that most parents have a knowledge of, or is this just the sort of thing that is sort of taught and hopefully you retain it?
So there's two components. Yeah. One is that you hit the nail on the head, because you can have knowledge. Mm-hmm. You could have taken a course. When reality and the doo-doo hits the fan, it turns into a whole different thing at that moment. Right. Like you mentioned, specifically your own loved one. Yeah. So, preparation is fantastic. When it happens, it's a situation with a lot of panic going on. And so that's why that first look and that first point to dial 911 is so crucial. Because you don't know what that kid is going to look like when they come out of the water. Right. So and you can always call them back or cancel, or while you're on the line with them, it's going to be a couple of minutes, and you can always say, oh, by the way, they're doing okay, don't worry about it. But that first part that's why it's so crucial, because parents, when it's young kid, it's a whole different ballpark. There's a lot of panic going on. But it's like any other safety. The more you practice, the more you have it in your head of the different steps, the better it will be at the moment. But this is not something that you can, certainly train for in real time.
My guest is Dr. Ali Jamador, and he is a board-certified emergency medicine physician. He finished his undergraduate studies at the University of California, Irvine, and subsequently attended Western University of Health Science in Pomona for his medical studies. He went on to complete his residency in emergency medicine at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center in San Bernardino County, which sees over 120,000 patients a year, where he served as chief resident in his final year, and he has served as medical director and associate chief of staff at Olympia Medical Center in Los Angeles, and he has just assumed the title of medical director at Dignity Health St. Mary's Medical Center in Long Beach. This is Tuned In from Mount Wilson FM Broadcasters and Global Jazz Incorporated. Good morning. My name is Mike Johnson. Doctor, as we talk about the pool, of course, that of course leads right into other things that are summer-related. And summer, of course, is a time when people, even in this day of social distancing and trying to do the right thing, people still sometimes overexert themselves. I remember as a kid, even growing up, hearing the term heat stroke and sunstroke. Is that concept still very relevant today?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So it's a spectrum of events that occur, and heat stroke is towards the end of that spectrum. Mm-hmm. And so, people can feel hot and warm. You start feeling a little bit fatigued. The term that I like, the next term that I like is heat exhaustion, where you are certainly in the dehydrated state. People can have headaches, vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, and as that progresses and you start having neurological symptoms such as confusion, slurring your speech, forgetfulness, you start getting into the heat stroke category, which is towards the end of the spectrum. Yes, it's still alive and well, and people are still getting heat stroke, heat exhausted, and just plain dehydrated all the time.
How big of a factor is it that the folks who might be, and I'm going to take this on a different level here, if you're out back in your garden, you just happen to be out back, you're digging up the weeds, or you're trimming the rose bushes, or you're doing, raking, whatever it might be, mowing the lawn. How much of a factor is just the folks who are dehydrated versus the folks that may not be using sunscreen?
Oh, great question. So sunscreen will protect your skin, right? So it'll protect your skin. It's not going to prevent you from getting dehydrated, heat exhausted, or heat stroke. So you might be laying in the bed in the ER. The next thing you know, and you won't have a sunburn. However, you will still be in heat stroke. So
really,
absolutely. Yeah. Now things like an umbrella, things that provide shade, those kind of things can certainly help prevent dehydration and leading into the spectrum of heat stroke.
Yeah, and understandably so. And of course, whatever you can do to protect yourself. I'm guessing even wearing like a hat can give you some sort of cover.
Absolutely, yeah. Anything that kind of covers you up, and it's a good point you bring up, because one thing is to be laying around the pool and laying around somewhere, and you're naturally sweating and you're getting cooled off. When you're actually exerting yourself, such as gardening or mowing the lawn, you lose significantly higher amount of fluid, and you will get to that spectrum that we talked about much more quickly. I don't see a lot of 15-year-olds mowing the lawn these days. So if it's going to be someone's parent who's 65 or 75 who is a little bit more susceptible to getting dehydrated. So you have to be super careful.
No, and you're right. I mean, that's maybe not as common as it used to be, but by all means, the people, whether you're 15 or 75 or somewhere in between, if you're outside exerting yourself in the sunshine and it's a triple-digit day and there's not a cloud in the sky, and you think, well, this is no big deal. I'm just doing the lawn, or I'm just doing the weeds, or I'm just, I'm sitting down when I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing. The heat and from the sun can, can fool you, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. And so the more elderly and the very young do get impacted significantly higher than the middle age range goes. The more elderly ones, just because of the fact that they'll usually be on some medications, either diuretic or some other medicine that can compound the effects of the heat. And the very young, just because their body, the proportionate amount of skin that they have to their body, they're more exposed to the sun, and so they're just more fragile. So those two age ranges definitely do get these problems more often than others.
My guest is Dr. Ali Jamador. He is the medical director of the emergency room at Dignity Health St. Mary Hospital in Long Beach. This is tuned in from Mount Wilson FM Broadcasters and Global Jazz Incorporated. Now, doctor, there's a concept here that has been I've been alerted to that I must admit I know very little about. The idea of dry drowning. What is dry drowning?
Yeah, kind of a crazy term, right?
Yeah.
So there's two terms that they like to use: dry drowning versus wet drowning.
Okay.
So dry drowning is essentially when the water is not entering into your lungs. So the patient will essentially swallow some water. It will either go through the nose and go through the back of the pharynx and go down into where you swallow it, or you even swallow it from your mouth into your esophagus, where food and water and stuff usually goes down. So it goes down the right pathway. However, the chemicals and the different things in that water, specifically pool water usually, will cause inflammation in your lung lining. And you are essentially, quote unquote, drowning because your lungs are swollen, inflamed. You can cause your own reactive fluid inside the lung from that, but you never inhale the water into your lungs. This is a little bit different than the wet drowning in a sense that usually these signs of dry drowning will show up a little bit earlier. So the kid falls in the pool, they swallow some water, they come right back up, and you didn't notice, you come right back up, you don't notice anything, they're not really coughing that much. They might cough and vomit some of the water up, and it comes out of their stomach. And so parents think, okay, good, just come in their stomach, and they throw it back up, and everything's done. But those chemicals can actually cause that irritation, and up to 24 hours later, you can have symptoms.
Really?
That first present themselves. So you go home, everything's fine, you're sleeping at night, the kid wakes up, comes to your bed, says, Mom, I'm having a hard time breathing. And so anytime there's any kind of an incident where there was a questionable underwater experience, such as a choking or anything, you need to be aware that drowning can present itself even as late as 24 hours after the initial exposure. Wet drowning, basically, it's somewhat similar in the sense that something happens, the kid falls in the water, they cough, they choke, they come back up. However, a very small amount of water actually did go into the lungs. And so, that can also present itself later on as well. At that moment, they were not bad enough to go to the hospital, but it can present itself much later as well.
As a physician, is this common? I mean, or is this just sort of a once in a blue moon situation?
It's definitely not a once in a blue moon situation. So between June 16th and July 16th, and a little bit further out in the summertime, we do, I don't want to say regularly, but we do see dry drowning with kids coming in, where the kid and the parent swear that they never inhaled the water.
Right.
However, later on they get the inflammation of the lungs. And listen, 95% of the time they just require oxygenation, observation, X-ray of their lungs, and everything turns out well. However, there are emergency situations where the breathing is bad enough where they have to be, placed on a ventilator, unfortunately. But
I mean, I think that the idea here, and I'm not trying to frighten any parents or people who might have small children, is that if you have a child that has apparently gone in the pool and maybe cannot swim or does not know what to do properly, once you think everything is in the clear, you kind of have to keep an eye on your child for maybe another 24 hours then, just to make sure everything's right, don't you?
Absolutely right. And so this is a really, really good point. It's a really, really, it's a term that not many people know about. It's a situation that not many people necessarily think about. And so if there's one huge takeaway point from this is that it is a real thing. It's a real phenomenon. And yes, take the children seriously when they say anything about their breathing later on after their experience in the pool.
Very frightening, but very good information. Dr. Ali Jamador is my guest. This is Tuned In from Mount Wilson FM Broadcasters and Global Jazz Incorporated. We are speaking about pool safety and summer safety and watching out for things like dry drowning. And now, Doctor, we are in July and the holiday is right upon us, or is, look, the way that it's working at this point, there are many people who are lighting off fireworks late at night, whether it's July 4th or beyond July 4th. Fireworks safety. Everyone has seen the videos before online, and there are, of course, so many visuals of people who unfortunately have had parts of their body destroyed, by recklessly using fireworks.